Hearty good afternoon to all. Welcome to our third session. Today we'll be having a topic on principles of communication and it will be taken by Dr. Biju Raghavan. So we can start with sir's presentation and we can have a discussion round following it. Thank you all for joining in. Over to Sunil sir.
Good afternoon. So, welcome to the third session. So, we know that in COVID, there are many people facing many emotional issues because of many problems associated with COVID-19. This session is going to be very important and relevant. The basics of providing emotional support is by applying the principles of communication. So Dr. Biju Raghavan, who has done his diploma in pain and palliative medicine from Abda Institute of Medical Sciences and has more than 15 years of experience in pain and palliative medicine. And presently he is working as senior consultant and head of pain and palliative medicine department at Rajagiri Hospital, Alva. So Biju, welcome, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Sunil. Welcome, everybody. Today's session is on the basic principles of communication in the times of COVID. Rajlakshmi, if you could start sharing the presentation. Yeah. So, can you, yes, right. So, can you go on to the next slide? So today we are just going to talk about the basics of communication skills. Next slide. So communication in our healthcare environment is challenging to begin with. Even in the best of times, it is not easy because in healthcare environment, people come to us not because they want to come to us. They come because they are sick, they are not well, they are in pain, they are suffering. So to start off, we start with the negative. That is, we get patients and their families in a negative state of mind because they are ill, they are not well. And then what we do for them and how we care for them, the perception of that is not in our hands. The perception is in the eyes of the beholder, in this case the patient and the family. And hence it is a very, very challenging. Communication in our healthcare environment is much more challenging than other areas like business or hospitality industry. In healthcare services, communication is challenging. Next slide. Next. Next. So communication errors or lack of communication or inadequate communication can lead to a lot of medical errors. Research shows that around 60 to 70% of medical errors occurs as a result of poor communication, which are completely preventable. And medical errors in the best of times lead to a lot of problems. And in a hyperacute situation like a pandemic, there's a high risk of medical errors, and hence it is very important to focus on proper, precise, adequate communication to reduce medical errors, especially in these times. Next slide. And this may not be an important aspect as far as pandemic management in the government environment is concerned, but financial outcome is definitely an issue in the private sector, as well as where insurance, Mediclaim insurance is an issue. This article came up in uh, 2010 in the Journal of Healthcare Management, where Agarwal et al. Had come to a conclusion that the hospital on average lose $12.3 billion each year due to communication inefficiency. This was, of course, done in US, but suffice it to say that we also even though we don't have any Indian evidence, but we also will definitely be affected in terms of finances and inefficiency of communication, leading to inefficient financial outcomes. Next slide. Now, while we are in the process of becoming doctors, all through our medical education time period, we are tested. We are tested thoroughly. We are tested on our medical knowledge. We are tested on our ability to do a physical examination, and we are tested on our problem solving skills. That is the science part of it. But next slide. What about our communication skills? Uh, Most of our Indian medical colleges do not have uh, a proper course on communication skills. And even if where there are some workshops or some classes conducted on it, it is never part of testing of clinical competency. Whereas in many of the Western developed countries, communication skills are an essential part of their clinical competency, and it is tested uh, thoroughly. And because of this lacunae in our educational system, we are at a disadvantage because medical communication skills is something that we all need to learn. It doesn't matter whether we are extrovert or introvert, or whether we have language skills or not. Some among us may be good at communication, but it should not be left to individual brilliance. It is a right of every medical practitioner to be taught and to learn communication skills. So our medical education has a lacuna. Next slide. Studies show that doctors on an average interrupt their patients. Hold your breath. Next slide. 18 seconds into the interview. This study was done by Beckman et al. Way back in 1984. It this comes as a surprise to most medical practitioners, most doctors. We feel we are giving people a patient hearing, but the fact is that we are not. We interrupt very early and we interrupt multiple times, and all of these things leads to many problems in the sense that it leads to dissatisfaction. It also comes in the way of us getting a better history, and as a result a better grip on what exactly is going on. So it is important for us to learn to listen, actively listen, and minimize our interruption and encourage uh, communication from the patient end. Next slide. Now, a doctor-patient relationship, uh, the effective communication skills is the central theme of it. Next slide. It has a multifaceted effect on the relationship. For example, a good communicator will be able to elicit a good history, which will aid in better diagnostic accuracy. We all know about that, how important the medical history is. That is why we all emphasis do not rely on investigation. First, focus on proper history taking. Investigations are only going to help with diagnosis, but the important part is history taking. And patient compliance is also dependent on how effectively we are able to communicate to them. You may have the best prescription for the patient and you write it. But if the patient can't afford your prescription, The patient gets to know he or she can't afford when the person takes a prescription to the medical shop. And if he's not able to buy the medicine prescribed by you, the effective outcome would be not what you were hoping for. So the best prescription becomes a waste if you do not understand the psychosocial economic situation of the patient. If you had taken that history and you have understood that the patient has financial constraints, you could have given an option. You could have given a more practical prescription, which would get you the same outcome, which your best prescription could not. So, patient compliance with your treatment and the outcome depends on not only your knowledge of your medical skills, but also how you're able to communicate it. And good communicators will definitely have more satisfied patients. And if your patient is satisfied, your team will naturally be satisfied. This also has a direct bearing on patient safety, because if you have not communicated well to your team as to what is to be provided to the patient and what not, it can lead to patient safety issues. We all know about look-alike, sound-alike medication and the problems they cause, and how important it is to communicate those things. All of it contributes to patient safety. And where patient safety is compromised, chance of litigation is definitely going to increase. So overall, as I said earlier, communication in a doctor-patient relationship is a multifaceted thing, and we have to really appreciate the role of good communication in a doctor-patient relationship. Next slide. Next. So this survey came up in 1986. It was from the Headache Journal, and what they found out was the best predictor for resolution of headache problems turned out to be the patient's perception that they had had an opportunity to tell their story and discuss their concerns about the headache fully with their physician during the first visit. So, a patient hearing, active listening is definitely going to improve patient satisfaction and your clinical outcome. Next slide. Now, that was a kind of introduction. Now, going on to some barriers to communication. Next slide. Nowadays, in the times of COVID, because there is social isolation of the patient and social distancing, etc., we are relying on technology to reach out to each other. Now, this Zoom echo meeting is an example. People are meeting each other over the phone or video chats like never before. However, what happens if there is no telephone coverage? There are many parts of our country, many parts where the telephone coverage is not good. That becomes a barrier to communication. Many hospitals are resorting to telemedicine. But what if we may have excellent infrastructure in our institution, but what if the patient uh, does not have adequate network at their home? And what about those who are technologically challenged? A lot of our vulnerable patient population who are elderly may not know how to use this technology. So, yes, technology is an enabler, but please, we have to keep in mind that technology can also be a barrier, or the lack of it, or not having the knowledge, know how, can be a barrier. Next slide. Many a times, the patient or the family can be barrier, uh, especially in the context of a pandemic. People may be very anxious, or they may be depressed, they may be scared, they may be angry because of the situation. And apart from that, patient may also be having a pre-existing disease which affects communication. For example, if somebody had a stroke and is having an aphasia or a dysarthria, all of it, this can be a barrier. So barriers at the patient level can affect communication. Next slide. So there can be a lot of barriers in society. There can be a lot of stigma, and as a result, we see that many of the doctors and nurses and other medical professionals are being stigmatized. Many landlords are asking them to leave. They are being evacuated. Some are even being physically threatened. This is happening because there's a lot of fear about this thing. People are gullible, and many of them are poorly informed. They may be literate, or they may be from upper social strata, but they are still gullible and poorly informed. And as a result, fear makes us behave in irrational manner and produces stigma. So those kind of things, the social barriers can be a barrier in communication. So the answer obviously is to get people more informed. Uh, help them get over fake news on WhatsApp and other social media. And it is a duty of the government and authorities to get people well informed. Next slide. Now, uh, today morning, Dr. Jitin gave this contribution in our PAL COVID Echo 2 at 7:40 a.m. So I'm thankful to Dr. Jitin for this. So this is something which Dr. Rajagopal sir had also mentioned in his that presentation day before yesterday. It is the reaction to illness, reaction to bad news, reaction to stress, the 5 stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So Dr. Jitin had provided this Kubler-Ross model for 5 stages of grief towards coronavirus. I don't know his source, but anyway, I'm grateful for his contribution. So I decided to put it up in this slide instead of the traditional slide that we have for this. Now, uh, there is this phase where denial, anger, bargaining, and depression, all four, would be a barrier to proper communication for obvious reasons. So it is important that we have to give time to people, because this is essentially an emotional response. We have to accept that people can be in different stages of their reaction. It could be denial, it may go into bargaining, it may come back to anger, it may go to depression, it may go to acceptance, it may again go back to denial. These things do not go in a linear way. It goes haphazard. It can be all over the place. So when we talk to people, we'll get an idea which stage of their response is, and we accept that they are and try to communicate with them, knowing that they are in bargaining phase or in denial phase, and hopefully they will come to an acceptance stage. So acceptance stage is obviously the best place where you can have meaningful communication. But sometimes we may get irritated, and because we are trying our best, but they are just not able to take our message, because they are in one of those stages where, because of the heightened emotion, they are not able to have a proper we are not able to have a proper communication. Next slide. Now, some of the things that we can deal about is about us. So the question is, can we be barriers to communication? Next slide. Especially with the pandemic, not everybody, but many of us are looking like this. How is it possible to have a communication with a person who looks like this? For a layperson, this person or this image can be a scary image. Next, and if we are not wearing coveralls, at least most of us are wearing a face mask nowadays. The face mask takes away our smile and our facial expression. So we may look like the person as it's there in the ID card, but now the patient cannot see us. And non-verbal communication, especially our facial expressions, are covered up. And that's a huge disadvantage. That's a huge barrier that unfortunately we need to wear the mask for our own protection. And unfortunately, in the times of pandemic, that is a barrier to communication. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned earlier, our lack of training is a barrier. Most of our medical colleges do not train us how to communicate bad news, how to manage collusion, or even how to handle an angry person. So all of these things are important in the times of pandemic, especially in the times of pandemic. And most of the palliative care colleagues are well trained because the daily part of their professional life, they have to deal with one or more than one of these three things. Next slide. Coming to anger, anger is a high energy consuming negative emotion. There are multi-factor etiology for anger. It is not that somebody wakes up in the morning and says, today I'm going to get angry. It doesn't happen like that. Over a course of the day, many things happen. The person gets stuck in the traffic or gets late for the appointment, and at the place at the hospital, uh, the person at the counter keeps the person waiting for a long time, or they are working against a deadline and need to get back to office and things are getting delayed. These things make a person feel helpless, and all of these things can add to emotional stress. And emotional stress can come out like high energy consuming negative emotion like anger. So anger is possible due to many reasons. And unfortunately, as doctors and other healthcare providers, we are the people who are available for people to vent their anger. And as a result, most of us, as part of a professional life, have to face anger. Next slide. So when patient or a family member or somebody gets anger, we have to facilitate anger to flow. For that, we need to stand and listen. Please remember, if you are sitting and the person who is getting angry is standing, our posture of our sitting posture is going to be a barrier. So for a good flow, we have to make our body position in alignment with the person who's getting angry. And if somebody is getting very angry, welcoming them to have a seat and sit down may make them even more angry. So the best thing is to first stand up and listen. And while you're standing, slightly bend the spine forward, because that your body language shows respect to the person who is getting angry. And make an confident eye contact, showing that you are not afraid. So you are not afraid, but you are respectful to the person, and you stand and listen. So this way, when you are neither reacting nor ignoring, but actively listening to the person, the high anger will slowly come down within minutes. And once the high anger comes down, then you can invite the person to sit, discuss, and allowing the person to ventilate even more. Many a times, just allowing the person to ventilate solves the matter. However, if there are any specific things and which can be corrected, correct the correctables. So this is the general principle of managing an angry person. I conduct workshops where a major part of the time is taken up on how to do it, role play and acting and things like that. But this is not the time for that. Next slide. And you can also get angry because one, we are also scared. We may not have slept well, we may not have eaten well, we may not have had time to go to the bathroom, we may be having a full bladder, and we're just not having time to go to the bathroom. So a lot of things can happen which will frustrate us, make us irritable. So uh, when not in duty, make sure that you take good care of yourself. And while on duty, have a couple of people, maybe one person or more than one person, to spot whether you are getting irritable or you are behaving in an angry manner. And make sure that you give the spotter enough confidence to give you an honest critique of what is happening. So when the person you have designated, your colleague or a friend, to tell you that you are behaving in an irrational manner, in an angry manner, or you're feeling, or your face is showing irritation, or your voice is showing irritation, in those kind of situation, uh, they should feel confident to come to you and tell you this is how you are behaving. So once they tell you, then you know this is how you're behaving. It will give you a chance to calm down. Next slide. Now, coming to a couple of do's and don'ts, there are many. I've just kept 5 or 6 for this session. Next slide. The don'ts. One thing is that when we are very busy, we may start avoiding eye contact. And so it is very important to make eye contact with your patient families, your colleagues, and others, because it creates, avoiding eye contact creates a barrier in communication, and making eye contact facilitates communication. And sometimes our facial expression uh, can be very grumpy or stern. So we need to smile. And irrespective of whether you're wearing a mask or not, you must learn to smile while you are in your professional role. And when you're wearing a mask, at least what you can do is to bring a smile in your voice. So you should have a warm and welcoming tone of voice. Next slide. Categorizing or labeling. Many a times we categorize people as, oh, the person is a very difficult person, or she is a VIP patient. Now, when you categorize or label people, we get prejudiced against them. And it's very easy to categorize people. It is very easy to put labels on person, right? We have plenty of examples uh, in that. For example, now there's labeling that Chinese are dirty people because the virus originated from it. And we know that it is not true. There are dirty people across the globe, and there are very neat and clean people across the globe. But that is the label that is going on right now with the uh, pandemic. It creates prejudice in our mind. So we have to practice being non-judgmental. It does not come easy. We have to constantly practice being non-judgmental, and we have to accept people as they are and respect people for what they are. Next slide. And we have to stop asking leading questions. For example, your pain is better, isn't it? So somebody who is a vulnerable patient from a poor socioeconomic background will find it very difficult to say, no, my pain is still there. If you ask, your pain is better, isn't it? So the simple thing is to always ask open-ended question. How are you today? How is your pain today? So then the person can tell you exactly how they are feeling. Next slide. Do not minimize or compare patients' problems. Many times we'll say, oh, you are why are you worried over such a small problem? This is nothing. Look at other people who are facing much bigger problems. So when you minimize or compare patient's problem, they feel that you don't care, and that is going to create a barrier. Always acknowledge people their problem, because for everybody their problem is the biggest problem in the world, and then try to normalize their experience. For example, anybody in your position would perhaps feel this way, so you're acknowledging it. And another an example is considering what you're going through, it is normal to feel this way. So you're allowing the person to feel normal, that I am feeling so bad, I'm feeling so miserable. It is normal to feel like this in this situation. So that is the important thing to do. Next slide. Do not give false hopes. If you can't do anything, at least don't give false hopes. For example, don't worry, we are there with you, we'll take care of all problems. So many times we can't do many of the things, but when we say something, the patient or the family will believe us. And when that doesn't happen, it will break their heart. They will feel so upset that we ditched them or we did not do enough for them. So always give realistic hope, things that you can actually do. And this is one area where uh, palliative professionals have one advantage, because uh, the curing of diseases may have limitation, but caring has no limits. So it is an incentive for the non-palliative care people in this today's session to try to uh, you know uh, learn, try to do some certificate course, and try to learn a bit of palliative medicine, because then your horizon will definitely expand. There is no situation where you have to say, oh, there is nothing more I can do for you, because once you learn the principles and practices of palliative medicine, you can always say there's something more I can do for you. No matter how hopeless the medical situation is, there is always something more to be done as far as care is concerned. Next slide. And I guess this is the last of the do's and don'ts. Do not assume. So we may be saying some nice words like "don't worry." COVID for most people has only minimal symptoms, and 80% people do not need any treatment at all. From our point of view, we are saying some nice words to the patient. But for the patient is thinking, how will my children eat tonight? Yeah, I am not working and I don't have money. How will my children eat tonight? So we say things by assuming what people must be worried about. So the simple thing is to ask people what are they worried about, and they will tell you. And when they tell the problem, it is possible that you may not have a solution to the problem, but at least you gave them a chance to ventilate their problems, to talk about it. And that is an option we are giving them at healing. We are not gods. We cannot have solution to all the problems in the world, but at least as human beings, we have within our power to listen to people. So when people are scared, when people are sad, ask why they are scared, ask why they are sad, and then they will tell you their story. They will tell you their problems. It is not necessary that you have to have a solution to it, but when you listen to it, you are doing a bit of healing there. Next slide. Now, coming to the uh, problem, there is one solution I have to offer. Get uh, a large a photo ID tag. Either you can get it done yourself, or you can ask your hospital management to get it for you. Our usual IDs are small, so maybe get a larger ID with your face and your name clearly visible from a 2-meter distance. That is the social distance we are supposed to keep. And that could be one solution. And another solution, and another thing is, if you're a doctor or a nurse, do carry a steth with you around your neck or in your pocket somewhere, so that people know, they can understand, they can see. And this also contributes to improving their confidence. So your face must be face has to be covered, but your a bigger ID tag will uh, tell the patient what you look like and what your name is. So that is possibly one solution that I can think of. That's why I put it over there. Next slide. And whether you're wearing coveralls or just a face mask, doesn't matter. Please touch your patients, because a human touch works miracles. It brings a smile to another human being who is suffering in pain or illness. As doctors, it is very important to not only dispense medication, but also to dispense human touch. Feel free to sanitize your hands 100 times a day, but please don't let go of the human touch. I can't emphasize this enough. Next slide. Now, this is our Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan, who is now famous for his 6 a.m. Uh, press briefing. Now, this is something that we need to learn and practice. As healthcare providers, we need to provide regular briefing, especially to those people outside the hospital, the family members and relatives. It can be done either face to face, or if that is not possible, over the phone or video chat. But give them a regular briefing, and this must be done preferably by a senior person in the hospital. Uh, and it's also important to give a daily briefing to the patient also. So the briefing has to go outside as well as inside. And briefing should not be confined only to the patient and the family. Regular briefing to the hospital workers. It may be your colleagues, it may be your nurses, it can be your other healthcare workers. A regular briefing to everybody it creates transparency, and everybody is on the same page, and that creates a lot of confidence. Next slide. Transparent and honest communication is very, very important. And apart from briefing, we all need to work as a team. So in a team, everybody is equal. Everybody has a leadership role in their area of work, and everybody is equal. And as a result, especially we doctors need to be less paternalistic. So when a patient says, or the family says, you decide, you don't give them just a menu of options. You also help them decide what is the best option. So there has to be a medical consensus on what is the possible best option. But it's also important to talk to the patient and the family, and to come to an overall consensus on how to move forward. And despite the medical consensus, the psychosocial situation or a financial situation of the patient's family may be such that they may not be able to comply with the medical consensus. So we will have to give them other options. Ultimately, it's a question of communication, understanding, give and take, and come to a solution which is practical and acceptable to all concerned. This takes some effort, but it is worth the effort when coming to a decision by consensus. Next slide. And I mentioned earlier about practicing self-care. So have a routine. I understand in many hospitals we are having a system of reserve, where 50% of the healthcare providers are staying at home and 50% are working. And after a week or two, there's a rotation where the reserve come to the hospital, and the other people go back to go back into the reserve group. So whether you're working, when you're working, you have a routine. You wake up in the morning, get fresh, and then you know come to the place. So when you are at home, also practice having a routine, because routine creates order in the in our system. And also, whatever possible, do exercise a little bit, and also find time for some meditation. It is up to you how you want to do it. There's not one way. There can be any number of ways of doing exercise and meditation. And have some pastime, indulge in some hobbies, do something out of the different things, because it's not very often we get some time for ourselves. And also stay connected with people you care about. All of these things will go a long way in a physical and mental well-being. So please take care of yourself. Only then can you take care of the patients and their families. So I think that's the last slide over here. I'll stop over here, and over to Sunil.
Thank you, Biju. Are there any comments or questions? If you have any comments, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. Yeah, Dr. Satendra.
Yeah, thank you so much for a very lucid presentation. I would like to raise a clarification first of all that you talked about that there is a lack of communication skill in the medical education, but since the last year 2019 onwards, now there has been addition of a longitudinal curriculum by the name of ATCOM in the new medical competency-based curriculum, which stands for Attitude, Ethics, and Communication. And this is a longitudinal, so it will run from the first professional to the final professional. It will be assessed also, so there will be formative and summative assessment based on that as well. In fact, just to give you one example, in the session on the doctor-patient relationship, for the first semester, because I teach physiology in University College of Medical Sciences, for that particular session, we have, in fact, organized the film screening of Hippocratic film. But unfortunately, by that time, there was the lockdown happened, and because of that, everything came to a halt. So that is a very good venue to improve the communication skill, because now it will be formally a part of curriculum and it will be assessed as well. And the second is one particular comment regarding the barriers to communication. You mentioned about that we may use a larger ID, but apart from that, I think I believe there are a lot of patients. For example, there may be a deaf patient, and many of the deaf patients, they lip read. So when we are using mask, in fact, some of our participants are wearing mask right now. It is a complete barrier to communication because those deaf people cannot lip read. So that is why some of the hospitals have come up with a solution. What they are using is a clear mask. So I'll share those pictures in the WhatsApp group. So that has been in use, and that can be a very good way so that you can see the facial expression, but apart from that, you will be able to lip read what the healthcare professional is able to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Satyendra. That's a lot of valuable information, especially about the transparent mask. I had no idea about, so I'll be very much interested to know more about that. As you said, you will share it with us in the group.
Yeah.
About the outcome, yes, I am aware of that. It's in the initial stages. It's a good beginning, and hopefully, over a period of time, it will become, very good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that information.
Anybody else? Yes, Dr. Mary Abraham. Madam, 1 minute. Let us unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
No, I must congratulate Dr. Raghavan on an excellent presentation. I think it's really worth listening to, and Very, very good. I mean, these are the things that is so important for a doctor-patient relationship, communication, and even with the era of, even with the mask, I think a lot can be even from the eyes, you know. Your eyes can also communicate, even if your facial expression is not there, but the eyes itself can communicate, empathy and uh, a lot. So, I mean, even if you don't have transparent masks, I think eye contact and eye communication is also very good. But overall, I thought the presentation is excellent. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the kind words. You made my day.
You deserve it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Amira.
Again, thank you. I was just going to just back up what you were saying about electronic use. Um, I have a neighbor here whose relative died a continent away, her mother, and the doctor was able to facilitate a 4-way WhatsApp call that had all siblings on it and with full PPE. And then the nurse who'd been looking after the patient sent a very short but very, very meaningful paragraph about how that last time went. So I think let us use, even if the patient themselves can't use this technology, we can facilitate or access our psychosocial colleagues who are backing us up on the front line to be able to do this. It's made a huge difference to that particular family.
Thank you, Moira. Yes, definitely. We should do everything possible from our end. Yeah, I mean, period. Thank you.
Any more comments or questions? Yes, madam. Please unmute yourself.
What I was saying, I was listening to someone who was treating patients in LNJP, that is the Lok Nayak Hospital in Delhi, which is attached to Maulana Azhar. They are so inundated, hard pressed, youngsters working long shifts. I don't know how much they are just, running from pillar to post. And at such times, communication, sitting and talking and all may not really be applicable when you're dealing with a mass kind of a situation that's happening in some of these government hospitals. So, I mean, ideally, that is what we should do, what Dr. Raghavan said. But these people are just, running around like anything. And I don't know, maybe communication is taking a backseat these days because they are just trying to facilitate this thing. I mean, it's not the ideal situation particularly when lots and lots of patients are there. So ideally it should be there, but sometimes it may be very difficult when you're a single doctor looking after so many patients, and the situation in these hospitals is quite grim, what I heard, in government hospitals in Delhi.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. That is definitely a challenge. However, I find that learning or getting trained in communication skills is especially helpful in this kind of situation when we are hard pressed for time, because good communication skill teaches us how to make best use of our time and how to get things done in a more efficient manner. That is the purpose of learning communication skills. It should save us time, energy, and effort. And communication does not mean just sitting somewhere and talking. It also involves a lot of body language, where we can, with no time, communicate empathy, we communicate the real human feelings. And that is where I just gave an example of a human touch. It communicates much more than any amount of talking can. So we may be busy, but there's one person who is, you see the person suffering, just a human touch, one word, you know, that is where the skill lies. So I think that good communication skills is all the more important when you are hard pressed for time.
Deepika, you have a question? Please unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, yes, Deepika.
Yeah,
Yes, we can.
yeah. Thank you, Dr. Biju. I'm very happy to hear you after a long time, so many years. And you are my first communication teacher. You have taught me from the beginning. So I would like, at present, I am doing MSc Cardiff. So you have developed one blog area where every country participants, they are sharing what all they are doing in their respective countries. So I'll share one document in maybe through WhatsApp or through email, like how to talk to the relatives patient. At least we are in direct contact with the patient, we can give them information, but how to deliver that information to the family members. They have formulated a very good checklist type thing, which each doctor or member of the team, when they talk to the family, they should follow that checklist.
Thank you, Lipika. Great seeing you after many years.
Yes, sir.
And I'm
But I
sure you're
can't
doing
see
well.
you.
I don't know why is that.
Your
Can you,
video is switched off, Viju.
my video switched off?
Yeah, your voice was not very good.
Okay. I don't know why.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
you now. Yeah.
Right, right. So, Lipika, great seeing you. And I'm sure you're doing well. I hope you're doing well.
Yes. I'm in Delhi now, so it's hot. Hot
Okay.
spot.
Yeah. And you said that you're going to share with us
Yes.
some checklist on how to talk to the family members. Looking
Yeah.
forward to it, Lipika.
Sure.
And we all learn from each other, right? So
Yeah.
there is no permanent teacher-student situation. We all learn from each other all the
Yeah.
time. So I'll
Yeah.
be looking forward to your what you're going to share.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So uh, the person who is logged in from Expedia M4, can you introduce yourself and ask the question or comment?
So my name is Susan. I'm working in a rural hospital here. And since our center is not a designated center, our main communication with the patients is when we send them as suspects to the government center. So that conveying to them that they are suspects and creates a lot of apprehension. And uh, how best you think we should be able to, like, what's the best thing that we should be able to say to them, and how do we convey that to them in a way that we won't create fear and make sure that they follow our instructions.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't have any any direct experience with dealing with COVID patients. Unlike you, who you are dealing with that kind of patients, I wonder if anybody in this group has an experience they can share.
Is there anybody who is directly involved in COVID care? I don't think anybody is. Okay, there is nobody, Biju. So what can be communicated? What do you think?
Oh, I can only then speak of generic
Yeah.
communication skills.
Yes.
For example, when we have somebody who is suspected to be having COVID, and we are supposed to refer them, to the concerned center, a higher center, then I guess the best policy is to be honest, because definitely in situations of notifiable communicable disease, we have to be honest with the patient and family. So that is one thing. But how you are going to convey the thing matters. It's best to sit them down and talk to them that this we are suspecting something like that. It may not be that, or it could be that, but it's always important to check it out. Make sure that you confirm the message. You give the message that this is very important for their own well-being and the well-being of their loved ones. That is how we have to convey the message, because otherwise the first tendency is to escape into oblivion, go and hide somewhere. So this message that it is important for their well-being as well as the well-being of their loved ones to get it checked, and if positive, to get whatever treatment is being provided at the center. You want to add anything, Sunil, or if anybody else wants to add anything to that?
Moira, do you want to add anything?
Thank you for asking. I mean, I think, Bijou, you're absolutely right. We need to apply our basic principles, but I also very much take on board our colleague from Delhi who was saying the busyness may get in the way. So let us think quite imaginatively and constructively how we can use other members of the team who are not in the direct care to add to the communication support. We know that social workers and other colleagues are very crucial. So let us see, when we're planning a response services, how do we ensure that there is a psychosocial response plan, just as there is for the more physical aspects of COVID, using the excellent communication skills that you said, Bijou. So therefore the emergency people use them, the rapid response use them, but we also have a backup psychosocial response to go alongside.
Thank you, Moira.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah.
Most welcome. Sunil,
Yes, yes.
if it is time to wind up, please do consider that.
Yeah. Are there any more comments? Okay, so if I don't see any more questions or comments, so let's wind up this session. Bijou mainly talked about how to communicate with applying basic principles of communication, so that we can give emotional support for patient and family. There are many barriers that specifically present in communication to COVID patients, which we know. So there are some solutions which we can apply, like Bijou told, a larger ID, then briefing to the patient. Then when you talk, it should be with a smiley voice. And Dr. Sadendra also added a transparent mask. So these are something which we can experiment with in COVID patients. Thank you, Bijou, for your wonderful session, and thank you all for your active participation. And we'll see you tomorrow with a topic on triage, which will be taken by Dr. Moira Leng. Thank you all.
Looking forward to that, Moira.
And looking forward to your comments when we have the discussion, Bijou.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a good day, all of you.